Before you begin making the gluten ball, preheat the oven to 450 degrees Fahrenheit. Preheating the oven will allow it to heat up while you are working, saving you time. Place the flour in a small mixing bowl. The flour contains the proteins that will create the gluten matrix. Gradually add the water to the mixing bowl. The water hydrates the proteins in the flour and allows the dough to form. You may not need all of the water, so add just enough to make a stiff dough, but no more. However, some gluten treatments may need more water, and if so, remember to measure the amount you add to the dough. Stir until the flour and water are thoroughly combined and the dough forms a ball. Once the dough has formed a ball, record the amount of water you used. You will need this measurement for comparisons with other treatments. Next, knead the dough ball for 5 minutes. Kneading develops the gluten structure. It's important to have a well-developed gluten structure before rinsing out the starch. This will prevent the gluten from falling apart. Place a strainer in a bowl under a water faucet. Work the dough ball with your fingers under gently running water to wash the starch out. Keep the strainer under the dough to catch any pieces of dough you might lose. Return these pieces to the dough you are working so none of the pieces are lost. Work the dough gently to avoid disrupting the gluten matrix. Be sure to avoid tearing or pulling it into pieces. Continue working the dough until the gluten is free from starch, leaving only the gluten matrix. The water will no longer turn cloudy, and the gluten will not have white areas because there will not be any starch left. The best way to test this is to squeeze the gluten into a clean custard cup and place the cup on a dark surface. You will see if the water is clear or cloudy. When the gluten ball is free from starch, press the gluten ball as dry as possible on a towel to remove any extra water. Press or blot very lightly. You need to remove the surface water, but the gluten may stick to the towel if you press too hard. Next, weigh the moist gluten ball and record the results. You will need the data for comparisons to the other gluten treatments. To prepare the gluten for baking, form the gluten into a ball and place it on a small square of parchment paper on a baking sheet. The parchment will prevent the gluten ball from sticking to the pan during baking. Place the pan with the gluten ball into the oven and bake at 450 degrees Fahrenheit for 15 minutes. This will leaven the gluten ball by allowing the water trapped in the gluten matrix to convert to steam, creating pressure on the gluten matrix and causing it to expand. After 15 minutes, turn the oven temperature down to 350 degrees Fahrenheit and continue baking the gluten ball for 30 minutes. This will dry out the gluten ball by removing water, but the lower temperature will prevent excessive browning on the exterior. Remove the gluten ball from the oven and allow it to cool before touching. Once it has cooled, weigh it and record the weight of the dry gluten ball for comparisons to the other treatments. You should cut the gluten ball in half to observe the gluten matrix. Use a serrated knife in a sawing motion to prevent crushing the gluten ball.